Just waiting for me to get a visual look. All right, we are connected. So what are we talking about today? We're talking about a balloon attack on United States soil that really happened. Because of course out in the news media and out in hyperbolic UFO land, right, where we have lots of hoaxers and people who monetize the UFO topic, right? So they take like national security, like the reality of national security, and they kind of make a joke out of it, pretend it's aliens, hey, like even when you watch the news right now and they start talking about the Chinese spy balloon, they get like this little smile on their face when they begin the segment, and that's because they're kind of, a lot of these news media places are owned by Hollywood, and so they're not allowed to just straight tell you that it's a national security incident, right? They have to make a joke out of it, pretend it has to do with some type of alien thing, and then at the very end they say, well, it's not extraterrestrial, it was just a balloon, right? And that's kind of what happens outside of the real UFO community, because of course we're the real UFO community. Other people who take the UFO topic serious, they're the real UFO community, and we're the people who are always ridiculed, never propped up into positions to speak to the public, because the UFO topic is basically just made a joke out of. And serious people like us are kind of left to do our own research and history here in the UFO underground, because of course this video will probably get about 10 views. No one will ever hear about it. And the news media will just continue on that they're just so flabbergasted that a balloon could make it over United States soil, when literally this has been happening for almost 100 years now. And I myself have built up a large collection of history related to balloons. In fact, here's one here. This is actually a man who practically invented the barrage balloon. So this picture you're looking at is from the 1930s. Okay, and this is from London. It says, invents aerial mine for air raid defense London. R.J. Muir with one of his air mines attached to a balloon which floats the mine above important areas as a guard against raiding warplanes. The 8-ounce mine, 4 inches high, are attached by a 40-foot thin wire to the balloon. Groups of then could be sewn in the air as mines are placed at sea. When an invading plane strikes the mine, it explodes. Muir, a former artilleryman, says the plan has been approved but refused to try out by the Air Ministry. Because of course this is from overseas, this is not from the United States. And so there's the invention of the barrage balloon, pretty much, because that's what we're talking about. And then also, if we're going to continue talking about the Japanese balloons that made it over United States soil, here's an American. This is a real picture. This is not a copy. This is an actual authentic picture from the 1940s, where a United States professor is actually talking about the Japanese balloons which have been making it over United States soil. And of course, one of these balloons actually created a war casualty on United States soil. A family in Oregon was killed by a balloon that floated over from Japan. And so let's just read a little bit here, and then I'm going to show you the shrine to the family that died in Oregon. And again, let's remember that we're the real UFO community. We take these topics serious. This is why UFO seekers and others were warning people about Chinese infiltration of American airspace, because it's not the first time, and especially with the balloon, it's almost kind of ironic to see the news media hyperbolic about balloons, because we're about to read about how the news media worked with the US government to censor balloons with bombs that were making it over United States soil from Japan. And there was over 200 that crashed on United States soil. And if you don't believe me, that's the thumbnail of this video, is actually the little crash sites that all occurred. And this is part of the Roswell research that Tracy and I have been doing. And if you look at what we're looking at here on the screen, this is the origin and development. Actually, here's like the cover page, because this was made by the Smithsonian, because years ago, decades ago, a lot of these aeronautical people were very serious. They didn't just play aliens with Hollywood and these channels on TV and Hulu and Netflix and all of these news media elites and channels, which are owned by Hollywood, right, and these corporate entities, and they just kind of make a joke out of these topics. These topics used to be extremely serious, and so we're looking at a collection that was created by an individual, a person like me, who collected a bunch of items, such as things like this, and put them together for the Smithsonian, and that's what we're looking at, is a collection of those things. In fact, here's a newspaper article, Japanese balloon bombs recalled. This is from '77, when they're talking about the balloons that were coming over in the '40s. So let's begin now. We're reading from the collection created by this gentleman for the Smithsonian, back when people used to take these things serious. And we're going to read about the balloon attack on the United States, which actually killed a family in Oregon. And you've probably never heard about it. So let's begin reading here. From widespread reports during 1944 to 1945, along with paper and metal fragments, United States military authorities began piecing together a fantastic story. The following are 4 isolated but typical incidents that led the military to become concerned. Right, and again, this is part of the Roswell research Tracy and I have been doing. Unfortunately, I had to kind of proceed with telling people about this because the Chinese spy balloon kind of messed up my plan to kind of delay and allow me to do more research on this topic. So I'm just kind of doing an on-the-fly thing here, which really sucks. So continuing on. A father and son on an early morning fishing trip were just setting down when they observed a parachute or balloon-like object drift silently by and over the nearby hill. Moments later, an explosion echoed through the valley, leaving only a small trace of smoke coming from the direction in which the object had disappeared. By the time the two reached the area of the incident, fragments of paper were the only thing unusual in the silence of the North Woods. The next story. The attention of 2 farmers at work in their field was diverted to a sudden explosion in a nearby field and an eruption of a cloud of yellow smoke. They moved cautiously to the scene, only to find a small hole in the ground with metal fragments nearby. There was no evidence as to how this mysterious object was delivered. A mother tucking her sleeping child in for the night was shocked by a sudden flash of light through the window, followed instantly by the sharp crack of an explosion in the silent darkness. Ranchers coming over the top of a hill near where they had camped the night before discovered a partially inflated balloon entangled in the scrub brush. It had no bombs, but somewhere along its journey, it had discharged its lethal cargo. A Japanese offensive had been launched using balloon-borne incendiaries and anti-personnel bombs carried by wind currents to the American continent. World War II air raids by enemy planes usually allowed ample warning for people to take cover, but this new threat against the nation had never experienced an air offensive was being launched in silence without any form of warning by an air vehicle, dating back to 1783. And so what you're looking at right here is an actual picture of a balloon recovered on United States soil. This one is from 1945 and shows military and government officials inspecting a Japanese balloon near Burns, Oregon. Because of course, as you're seeing on the news media, in which they're hyperbolic about a foreign balloon coming over, right? Because they're always about, oh, if there's anything in the sky, it's an alien spaceship. It's an alien spaceship, right? Because for like the last 5 or 6 years, Hollywood's been running this big coordinated scheme with people within the intelligence community to brainwash Americans to think that the country is currently being invaded by extraterrestrial aliens. When in fact, over the past 5 to 6, 7, 8 years, the government, the intelligence community, has been working with Hollywood to coordinate a plan to cover up for Chinese infiltration of American airspace. And so that's why we're going over this Japanese balloon attack on United States soil, which occurred in World War II, is because you're going to see how the US government worked with the news media to censor it. And it's very similar to what's occurring now, because the UFO topic is very serious, and wanting to know about aliens is very serious. And just labeling aliens as a threat is extremely dangerous, in my point of view. I think that if aliens came, it should be more like Star Trek: The Next Generation. And when the Vulcans land for first contact on Earth, I think that humans should be very nice to them. I don't think humans should run around with guns, missiles, and F-22s and just shoot at aliens. And so when we talk about the UFO topic, we should take it serious. And so if a pilot is up shooting something and it's a balloon, we should label it a balloon and not tell people in our country that it could be an alien, because we're not trying to brainwash them. We're trying to learn the truth and take the truth wherever it leads us. And so we're going to continue on reading a little bit. The threat of an unheralded explosion with attendant death and destruction could panic the nation. There was no way of knowing the possible extent of duration of balloon launchings. In the dry season, widespread scattering of incendiary bombs could literally burn out the vast forests of the Pacific coast. This was Japan's intended purpose, along with the associated psychological effect upon the American people. Then there was the possibility of using balloons to spread germ warfare, a far greater menace. So think about that, friends. The Japanese were thinking about using balloons to spread germs. So if we're talking about biowarfare, think to yourself what has occurred recently. Could these balloons deliver germs? And I'm not going to use other terms because then I'll get censored. So for the 10 of you who will see this, because we're censored already, think about that. The Japanese in the 40s were already practicing the theory of delivering germs with balloons. Okay, so continuing on. The threat to the nation was far more frightening than the military or other government agencies dared reveal to the public, and so the situation was played down as much as possible. For the Japanese, this was not a simple air operation. It took 2 years of testing and preparation before the first bomb-carrying balloon was launched from Japan, but they drew upon a technology that dated back much further. And so here they're going to go back on blah, 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 and talk about how these things were originated. In fact, you can see it attributes in here the invention of the balloon bomb and other things to historical facts that this Smithsonian worker had dug up. Here's some pictures. A faulty ballast dropping mechanism caused this balloon to land without dropping its bombs near Tremonton, Utah, February 1945. Little damage was caused to the envelope. So I want you to look at this, friends. You're looking at a foreign balloon landing on American soil. 1945. Literally 80 years ago, just about. So I want you to remember that when you're watching the news media and they get hyperbolic because everything they see in the sky is an alien spaceship. And so when a balloon comes and they're freaked out because they thought that no country actually had smart people besides America, and no country could float something in the sky over where you live. I don't know how else and rudimentary to say it, because that's kind of how childlike the news media is on the UFO topic. It's literally like watching children. They see a contrail from an airplane, it could be an alien. They see a flare from the military, it could be an alien. They see an F-22 shooting down a balloon, but they don't find the balloon, it could be an alien spaceship that they're not finding, right? Because it's always childlike, because remember, the news media is owned by Hollywood, and Hollywood works with the intelligence community, and there's always this 50-50 wedge that they're trying to drive into the minds of people to brainwash them into thinking things are a utopia. But unfortunately, the utopia is kind of getting ripped apart right now. So here we go. Let's continue on reading. Here's more pictures of the balloons. Here's a Japanese balloon that they're inspecting, retrieved near Alturas, California in January 1945. Now remember, there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of these balloons, and the thumbnail for this video shows over 200 different crash sites, and we're about to go look at this. And remember this, we're looking at this too because of Roswell, okay? And I know that it's not politically correct. You're only allowed, and trust me, I'm totally banned from anything to do with like conferences, UFO conferences, and things like that because of the way I'm speaking to you, right? I'm not speaking in Hollywood jargon where everything is an alien. I speak in two terms. There could be aliens out there, they're visiting Earth, and then in a whole nother perspective, there's these things called governments and militaries on separate continents, and they fight together, okay? So we have these two things always running at one time. And so that's what we're doing. We're also talking about Roswell in a way where, yes, there could be aliens out there, aliens could have come to Earth in the same respect. Being intelligent individuals, using our minds, being open. We're also thinking about military avenues. So in the Roswell incident, I want you to think about this too. If we're talking about some type of balloon or some type of device, because maybe you didn't even find a balloon, also remember that these things were paper. Also remember that the Japanese had pictographs, their little Japanese writings, right, which are amazing. And trust me, I know I spent time growing up with a Japanese exchange student. Years and years I spent living with a Japanese individual. Greatest time of my life. Greatest time of my life. Mushi mushi. And so anyways, remember that these things could be made out of paper and also have Japanese writings on them. So when someone is just so quick to tell you that, hey, back in the 40s, some guy or lady discovered an object that was similar to a balloon and had hieroglyphics on it. So I want you to remember that if they hadn't even seen Japanese writing, they would just think that Japanese writing was some type of hieroglyph, like Egyptian. And that's what we're also trying to keep in perspective here, that this also infiltrates into our Roswell investigations. And so let's go ahead and we're going to zoom down here. I'm actually looking through a PDF here. And we're going to start looking at some of these crash sites. So I'm going to kind of bounce and skip around here. Like I was saying, I was going to wait to talk about these things, but this whole Chinese spy balloon has really just messed everything up. This is one of the things I had been working on for a long time here. So here we're actually looking at a chronology of the balloon bomb incidents. So we're looking at a list, as you can see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the screen there, where the incidents took place, where these balloons from Japan had actually made it onto United States soil and come down, or there was an incident. So let's skip to number 2 here. Number 2 is Hawaii, Kailua. It says a paper balloon including envelope, rigging, and some apparatus were recovered at sea 5 miles west of Kailua by the United States Coast Guard. Okay, and why is this important? Because in this story, we're going to see park rangers, Coast Guard, and people all through the federal government who knew that the Japanese were sending balloon bombs to the United States. People had died from them, and yet everyone in the government worked together to make sure that no one knew about it, right? Because at that time, they wanted to make sure that everyone thought they were perfectly safe. Nothing could ever happen to us. So here's another one, number 3, Thermopolis, Wyoming. It says fragments of a 15-kilogram Japanese anti-personnel high explosive was recovered as a result of this incident, which occurred 1800 Mountain West time, 6th of December. An explosion occurred at this time, followed by the sighting of what appeared to be a parachute descending to Earth. A bright red flame was also seen by observers of the explosion. Bomb fragments were recovered from the scene of the incident about 15 miles northwest of Thermopolis on the 7th of December. And let's skip around. So let's go to Alaska, because Alaska is where they just shot something down, right? The news media is like all hyperbolic. It could be an alien. It could be an alien. So let's look 80 years ago when a balloon came down in Alaska. Here we go. Holy Cross, Alaska, December 24th. Paper balloon found with most usual equipment. Number 6, Marshall, Alaska, December 23rd. Paper balloon, including 2 sandbags, recovered 15 miles north of Marshall. Let's move on now. We're going to Medford, Oregon. Number 10, January 4th. Fragments of what identified as an incendiary bomb exploded in a field 1 mile south of Medford, 1740 Pacific West time. A whistling sound, as if a bomb was falling, was heard prior to the explosion. Number 11, Sebastopol, California, January 4th. A paper balloon including envelope fragments, rigging, and apparatus landed at 1815 Pacific West time. Napa, California, number 13, January 5th. Fragments of balloon fabric found. Medford, Oregon, January 7th. We had already read that one. Let's move on to, I'm trying to skip through some different states here just to show you guys how literally spread out through the entire country these balloon bombs were. Here we go. Number 26, Nogales, Arizona, January 31st. Small fragment of balloon envelope found. Lawrence, Iowa, number 30, February 2nd. Paper balloon including envelope rigging apparatus was recovered. 31, Schuler, Nebraska, February 2nd. Piece of balloon paper 5 by 6 feet in size found. Newcastle, Wyoming, February 8th. Paper balloon including envelope and rigging recovered 25 miles west of Newcastle. South Dakota, Nolan, number 40, February 12th. Unexplained incendiary bomb explosion occurred. American Falls, Idaho, number 45, February 13th. Envelope only of a Japanese balloon found. See, and we can keep going on and keep going on and on and on and on and on and on. Oh, there we go. Okay. So here's incident, the last one, number 285. And remember, these are just documented because that's all they actually found. Number 285, Indian Springs, Nevada, July 20th. Balloon envelope, shroud lines, and valve found. Indian Springs, Nevada. You know what's interesting? Indian Springs, there's an Air Force base there. Anyways, so this is also a warning for people that if you're out in the forest, if you're literally just out anywhere and you find a balloon and strings like the shroud, don't pick it up because these Japanese balloon bombs are literally still out there. Seriously, you could like read through when the government is talking about these things and they tell you not to go out and just randomly pick something up if you find it because it could be one of these Japanese balloon bombs. So here's a crash site map. These are places where balloons from a foreign country equipped with bombs came and fell, or there were incidents of them on United States soil. Yes, these are all incident locations. That's how many they were. And it was completely censored by the news media. So I'd like to find more of this. We're going to look at the family that was killed. Trying to remember the page it was on here. Give me a second. Here's a picture of like the balloon setup. This is how they would launch it. So what you're seeing here is a ballast system down on the right hand side. You see like sandbags hanging off. Those things could be detached to allow the balloon to go up and down, because remember, as it's going from night to day, the balloon will rise and change altitudes, and the Japanese had to figure out ways of launching them. From what I discerned, it seemed like they were using submarines or ships and going off the coast and launching these things from the ocean using the jet streams, and then they would come over United States soil. And so now what you're looking at is this page here, war casualties on United States soil. And the first sentence here says, strict censorship in the newspapers and on radio concerning the paper bombing balloons prevented this vital intelligence information from reaching the Japanese. And so it's okay. Everyone has their opinion. And so in the opinion of the government and the news media, they didn't want Japan to know that any of these incidents or bombings were successful, or that anyone was even noticing them. So the United States military, the United States government, and the news media colluded together just to pretend that like nothing was going on. And so Japan was constantly monitoring our radio, and they expected to hear America going hyperbolic, kind of what's happening now in the news media. which is another reason I had to talk about this, because you shouldn't get so scared by a balloon, right? What? Okay, so let's continue reading here. It also kept many Americans uninformed of the possible hazards associated with this unusual weapon. And again, that's why I'm telling you about this, is because I'm trying to take Americans and put you in the light and give you some truth. So number one, so you don't die. Because you could be out like in the forest and find one of these things and die because the news media wanted to play aliens with the government. See? And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. Again, there's two facets. We have national security with real militaries, countries, and governments going on. And then at the same time, we also have the alien question. Could aliens be visiting here? And these things go on all the time. And we don't need to separate them and be one or the other. We can actually put them together and do both at the same time. So we do have real stories of people being abducted by aliens, real stories of people who believe that they've seen an alien craft on Earth. And then at the same time, we also have real national security going on. And that's what we're talking about here to help keep you in the light. And so let's continue reading. The area over which the bombs landed was so vast, considering their relatively small number, that the probability of personal contact was quite small. The law of averages did run out, however, on May 5th, 1945, when a bomb from a balloon exploded and killed 6 people 4 weeks after the Japanese had ended the balloon offensive. The tragedy occurred in the Gerhardt Mountain area, just inside Lake County, about 65 miles northeast of Klamath Falls, Oregon. The Reverend and Miss Archie Mitchell of Blythe, Oregon, on that day took 5 children with them on an outing. While the Reverend Mr. Mitchell was moving the car, Mrs. Mitchell and the children found a strange object lying in the woods. They called to Mitchell, now a mere 40 feet away, and he shouted a warning, for he had heard rumors of Japanese balloons. Almost simultaneously, one of the bombs detonated, killing Mrs. Mitchell and the children. The explosion produced a crater 12 inches deep, 15 inches wide, and 36 inches long. The incendiaries and demolition block were badly damaged by the blast but did not explode. Those killed were Mrs. Elise Mitchell, J. Gifford, 12 years old, son of Mr. and Mrs. Gifford, Eddie Egnan, N. Ginn, 13, Sherman Shoemaker, 12, J. L. Shoemaker, Joan Patsky, 11, and Dick Patsky, 13. Pretty sad, huh? That's like super sad. Forestry men who quickly gathered after the incident said the victims appeared to have been clustered around the balloon and someone must have tugged it enough to detonate a bomb. Due to censorship, the only publicity permitted about the incident was that an unidentified object had exploded, killing 6 persons. The 6 deaths were the only known fatalities on the United States mainland from enemy attack during World War II. Do you see that? This report, I believe, is from the 70s. And so we're going back to the 40s, and let's read this sentence again. Due to censorship, the only publicity permitted about the incident was that an unidentified object had exploded, killing 6 persons. Okay, and why are we repeating this? We're repeating this because it's the same thing the news media does to us right now. They say the UFO community is full of these radicals, freaks, drunks, as Tucker Carlson from Fox News calls all of us, just these drunks out there at 4 a.m. They don't know what they're doing, these UFO people. See, and that's what we're doing as serious UFO people. We're not those freaks that everyone calls us, right? The UFO community, we're not. Okay? This shows you that. The news media are the people you need to be deathly scared of because they're in some kind of collusion with governments, could deceive you about the nature of your reality. And this is a perfect example of that. So while the news media is out there saying, whoa, a Chinese spy balloon flew over, we shot it down in South Carolina, and there's an unidentified object they shot down in Alaska. Wink, wink, smile, smile. Could it be the truth is out there? Right? Because that's what you're seeing. They don't just say, wow, it's another balloon, right? Because they need to play the little game that the news media place. It comes from two places. It comes from the government, the military intelligence community, which needs Americans to be in a special position so they drive these weird propaganda wedges into our brain. And then it also comes from Hollywood, which monetizes specific things and has tons and tons and tons of these shows and movies and all kinds of things dedicated to the fact that there's aliens invading the United States right now. It's not China, it's not some other country. Oh no, that's impossible. There aren't smart people in other countries. Only smart people come from America, they tell us. Well, we're here doing our research and reading about history to educate ourselves to peek through these blinders that are created by the news media establishment, the military industrial complex, right? The Hollywood military industrial complex. That's what we're peeking through. That's why we're reading about this. So let's continue on. Here's a shrine that was finally dedicated to the individuals that died on United States soil. Near Blythe, Oregon is the Mitchell Recreation Area, dedicated by the Weyerhaeuser Company to commemorate the 6 Americans that died there due to the explosion of a Japanese bomb balloon. The tragedy occurred May 5th, 1945, nearly 1 month after the last balloon had been set adrift. Accidentally triggering of the bomb-entangled balloon caused the mishap. So what are we reading there? We also read that the balloon stopped at one point in 1945 and that this was found later after the Japanese had literally finished setting the balloons adrift. Thousands, if you ask my opinion, just from reading this. I would assume that they sent thousands, and many were just never recovered, died in the weather, and then also went to the bottom of lakes and oceans. But again, we're reading this because it also intertwines with the Roswell thinking. So we need to remember, if it was 1947 and there was some ranch hand who had discovered weather balloons before, right? Because W.W. Brazel in Roswell had discovered 2 weather balloons before from his own testimony in newspapers. And so if he had found something like this out on the ranch, it would be a pretty big national security incident, and we would have crash retrieval teams coming out. Do you see now? And I'm not saying that's what it is at all. 0%. All I'm saying is that we're giving an example at the time, a national security example, where some type of device with hieroglyphics, Japanese writing, could be found somewhere in the middle of nowhere, even while the people had stopped doing it, and the military would recover it. And it was a censored incident because the military wants to keep things utopian. And so then you have it getting covered up, and a cover-up of crash retrieval. So I just want you to think about that, which is why we're also talking about this. It's not just because we want to talk about balloons, right? Because the news media says balloons. Wow, where did these things come from? I can't even believe it. There's balloons that can float over the country. So we're not only talking about it because of that, we're also talking about it because of Roswell. So continuing on here, this is a picture of that Mitchell Recreation Area. I'm sure if any of you are in the area, this would be an awesome place to go and pay your respects to the individuals who sadly passed away from the Japanese balloon bomb. Here it says, in May 1949, the Senate Judiciary Committee approved a House-passed bill to pay $20,000 to the bereaved families. The bill, first introduced by Representative William Lemke, Republican, North Dakota, granted $5,000 to the widower of Mrs. Mitchell and $3,000 to the parents of each of the children. Senator Guy Gordon, Republican, Oregon, and other proponents of the measure said that the public had not been warned of the danger from the airborne bombs, although the armed services knew that several had reached the country. The Weyerhaeuser Company of Klamath Falls, Oregon, established the historic spot as a patriotic shrine to be known as the Mitchell Recreation Area for Mrs. Mitchell. The dedication centered around a native stone monument bearing a bronze plaque with the names of the victims. Other developments included outdoor fireplaces, appropriate signs for the memorial, and a protective iron fence around the site of the tragedy and monument. Thus, the United States paid another lasting tribute to its war dead, right? Because here we have civilians dying from a Japanese balloon bomb. Now remember, we're in the 1940s here, so let's read about some other observations, right? Because we're the real UFO community. We take this topic serious. We have this alien question about aliens being out there. Probably. Aliens coming here? Maybe. People say they are. And so we take it serious. And on the other foot, we also take national security serious. So let's read about some other observations that were being recorded at the time. Other American observations. That only a small percentage of bombs reach North America can be attributed to a malfunctioning of the ballast control mechanism. A considerable number of the bomb-dropping devices recovered in the United States and Canada reportedly had a high percentage of the blowout plugs still in place in the periphery of the lower ring. This apparently was accountable to the failure of either the battery or fuse. Recoveries clearly indicated that the balloons could survive serious malfunctions of the ballast-dropping device and still arrive over the target. Such balloons, however, usually showed indications of some of the ballast sandbags and cargo had been pulled off by contact with the ground or water. And why is this important? This is important because I want to show you this. This is a real picture here. This is part of the collection that UFO Seekers has created. Lots we don't show anybody. We don't need to. But when it relates to a story, and so that's what we're looking at here. We're looking at a real picture from the time. This is confirming that this story happened, the Japanese balloon bombings. And we can see on the back here, this is a real authentic picture. We can see like the dates and the writing here from the news story. So I'm going to read this to you. It says, expert, New York Bureau, June 1945. Blah, 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 blah. University of Minnesota demonstrates an automatic ballast release he has perfected for experimenting with pilotless balloons. Blah, 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 blah. The professor predicts that the threatened balloon bombings of the U.S. will be ineffective since it is unlikely that they can be directed at military objectives or cities with any degree of accuracy. No matter where it is launched, a balloon moves only with the wind. And so that matters too because things have changed a little bit. So as you saw in one of our videos where we captured a large balloon over the city of Bakersfield, California, the balloon was actually moving against the wind. There was a high degree of high altitude wind, and yet the balloon stayed in position over us in Bakersfield. It was the strangest thing ever. And so the reason we're talking about that is because the new balloons, like the China spy balloons, have some type of device or engine which keeps them in position. I was trying to read more about this Office of Censorship. So in here, it actually talks about like the U.S. government's Office of Censorship. I'm trying to find it here. See, I mean, look right here. They have this thing called the Sunset Project. It says detection and interception of the balloons was of continuing concern to 4th Air Force. In order to arrive at the best defensive system, they initiated Sunset Project early in April 1945. This was to establish a test area covered by radar sites in an effort to detect Japanese balloons as they approached the Washington coast. This coverage extended from Cape Flattery in the north to the mouth of the Columbia River at the Oregon border. The locations and the types of equipment were as follows. And if you look on the screen here, there's actually radar right below my head there. There's radar and the equipment that was being used. And the reason I even read that really quick is because the current military for the United States, which we love veterans, we support all service members, we only talk about leadership of the military when we're ever saying or criticizing. We're never talking about an active service member or a veteran not in a leadership position. We're only ever talking about leadership. So the leadership of our military currently said they just adjusted the radar to look for balloons. And so you can see here that almost 80 years ago, they already knew that balloons were coming. They had radar systems for balloons, and it's only the current leadership that has screwed it up. And they don't look for balloons anymore. I don't know why. So here's a piece of some of the debris. Of course, what we're looking at is the lower section, which carried the ballast sandbags. Here it says United States Navy personnel. We're looking at the left picture. Steady the ballast dropping mechanism and bomb carrying device. The main bomb is suspended in the center while a ballast sandbag hangs at the right. Okay, I'm looking for the Office of Censorship. Let's see if I can find it here. There's so many pages in here, it's literally crazy. See, and here's all the different projects. Bear with me here. If you guys need to take a break real quick, go ahead. Because I'm looking for the Office of Censorship here. It literally says the government has an Office of Censorship. Oh, here we go. I found it. Oh, yeah, here we go. Here we go. This is what we want to read about. Okay, so take a drink, take a break, everybody. Let me check, make sure everything's okay. Okay, here we go. Okay, now we're looking at the American reaction. So this is like the psychological reaction to what was happening to Japan sending balloons over United States soil with bombs. And of course, the reaction is going to be censorship. And censorship has carried on literally 80 years later to us now sitting here on the internet getting censored, right? So here we go. Let's read this. And of course, remember, this is written at a time when historians at places like the Smithsonian wouldn't want to cover up things like this for the government. They'd actually want to tell Americans, because right now, a lot of us aren't told certain things because people in government at places also, like the Smithsonian, have political preferences, and so they hide things from us to help politicians. And so what we're reading right now was written at a time when people who wrote these things and covered history didn't cover up for politicians, and they were not scared to write about the truth. And so what we're about to read is all about the American government's Office of Censorship. Here we go. It says, the first discovery of a Japanese balloon introduced more mystery than immediate concern. This sighting was on November 4th, 1944, when a Navy patrol craft spotted what looked like a large fragment of tattered cloth floating on the sea, 66 miles southwest of San Pedro, California. The unidentified debris, see, and if we were news media, right, they said unidentified, so it's an alien, right? See, that's how the news media is when you see these words. And so that's why us as being the real UFO community, the serious UFO community that gets censored, blackballed, and banned, we care about these things. It says the unidentified debris was hauled on board and was soon determined to be a rubberized silk balloon with a heavy undercarriage attached. Ironically, this balloon was from the first group launched on November 3rd, just 2 days earlier. 2 days because of international dateline. Who even cares? Why don't they just write it in our date time? It says the apparatus still connected to the undercarriage of the balloon consisted of a small radio transmitter. The equipment bore Japanese markings and indicated that something new and mysterious had been introduced into these final months of the war. The incident was reported through military channels, but it caused little concern until 2 weeks later when a second fragment was salvaged from the ocean. Within the next 4 weeks, balloons were found in Wyoming and Montana. This clear evidence of a new and unexpected balloon-bore weapon gave rise to increased concern, and the assistance of all government agencies, national, state, and local, was immediately summoned. Forest rangers, state and national, were ordered to report any balloon landings and any recoveries of portions of balloons or their undercarriages. Of more and immediate vital concern was the reaction of the American people to this unorthodox weapon. What psychological response would develop from realization that the American continent was under sustained enemy attack for the first time in the history of the United States? What panic might result from the thought that countless silently moving balloons could be drifting across our continent, randomly discharging their bombs into homes and factories? The threat was a potential reality. And what of this load? See, nowadays, so I'm stopping here, but see, nowadays, and I'm going to stop right here because it's a perfect drop-in, because this is such a hard topic to talk about. Currently, China has been infiltrating American airspace. The news media, with the military intelligence community and the Hollywood industrial military complex, have been telling everyone it's aliens. Aliens have been invading the United States, and the US Navy has videos of them. Unfortunately for us, we're reading about this happening before, when the Japanese were sending balloon bombs, and they're going to cover it up with censorship. Now, instead of just plain censoring it, they collude together not to just say it doesn't exist, but to say that it's aliens rather than the China threat it is. It doesn't mean that the question of aliens being out there erases. It's not as if the question of aliens visiting Earth erases. What we're looking at is a weapon, a psychological weapon that the military and government uses to tell people that a real threat is something that's not a threat. So they're taking the Chinese spying, surveillance, and infiltration of our airspace and saying it's aliens. Now we're running into a problem because these things are highly visible to Americans. And so that's why we've seen the talking points collapse, especially with organizations like UFO seekers who don't just give in and say, oh yeah, it's aliens, brother. It's aliens, brother. No, we actually care about national security. And so that's why we're even talking about this now. And so continuing on, because we're talking about the psychological perspective of people of a country who now have the realization of just tons of moving bombs all over the place that could fall anywhere. And what of this load? We're reading, continuing. The destructive explosive power was measurable, but what of the incendiary threat? With our great forests along with the entire West Coast and extending inland, a massive incendiary raid during the dry season could envelop the entire area in one gigantic, uncontrolled holocaust. From this alone, the loss of lives, property, and building materials would be beyond imagination. There were further possibilities to consider. Biological agents could also be transported by balloon, spreading disease among the people and livestock over large areas of the United States. Panic, based on the fear of the unknown potential of this new weapon, was in itself a vital concern to responsible agencies in the United States government. The best defense against panic was to say as little as possible about this new menace and play down any anxieties. We're going to stop there for a second. Why? Because see, like I was telling you, these people who wrote this then didn't put a politician or a political party above what they're writing. And so these people who wrote this, the gentleman who wrote this that we're reading, was not scared to say that a balloon could carry a biological agent. Because nowadays they're not allowed to say that. Oh no, news media, you better watch yourselves. You're going to get censored like UFO seekers. You better just say whatever the intelligence community wants you to say. Oh, you couldn't put anything on a balloon. We ourselves, UFO seekers, have captured balloon delivery systems, delivering some type of hovering object into the atmosphere. So to us, being serious UFO people, not the freaks that Tucker Carlson and the Fox News crowd call us, the real UFO community, the banned, the blackballed, the people who are censored. The real UFO community already knew this stuff exists, and we've even gone farther to say that a balloon could deliver something over United States soil, and we've caught something doing that before. Go look at our video where it says the balloon's replicating. What you're seeing is the object coming out of the balloon. The balloon pops and falls down, and something stays up there. Not only could it deliver a drone or a weapon, it could also deliver biowarfare, friends, and it could deliver that to the animals in our country, the livestock. The people who wrote this, they weren't scared to say that. But the news media now, oh, it's an alien, right? It's an alien. They got to do that first before they even get serious about serious reality. So again, we're not like the children that we see on the news media, the people who make fun of the UFO topic. Look at this. 80 years ago, they're talking about biological weapons being floated over a country with a balloon. So when leadership in the United States military tells you balloons aren't a threat, you need to think twice about trusting that person. Because 80 years ago, they told us that it was a threat and could be a threat. Just remember that. So we're going to continue on reading about this. The lack of publicity associated with the balloon bombs had still another far-reaching effect. After the announcement in the newspapers of discovery of a Japanese bombing balloon in Thermopolis, Wyoming, Elaborate and apparently successful efforts were made to prevent the Japanese from gaining any knowledge of bomb damage and balloon sightings in the United States. It was obvious that the Japanese would be eager to know the effects of the attacks and that information on the courses followed by the balloons in the areas hit by the bombs would enable them to evaluate and improve their techniques. The one incident that had made the papers in the United States was indeed known in Japan. The Chinese newspaper Takunpao had picked up the report from American sources and repeated it in late December 1944. For the moment, this proved to the Japanese high command that the concept was sound and allowed the program to continue. To their chagrin, however, no further comments on the balloons were found, although United States, Russian, and Chinese reports were continually screened, right? Because the Japanese were screening all of the news media, right? So remember that when you see the news media and the news media is making a joke out of national security threats, right? Because a Chinese balloon comes over, it literally could have a biological agent spreading it all over the United States. They make fun of it as if it could be an alien spaceship, right? It's crazy. And so that's, sometimes I think like maybe these news media reporters are just childlike, like have childlike brains. And that's kind of just how they are. They're just like Ron Burgundy. But on the other half, I'll give them a little credit, and maybe they are just working with the government to brainwash people. And so they see this real object, this real national security threat, and still they want to tell the people, it could be an alien spaceship. Don't worry about it. On other news, let's check traffic, right? Because they go on about it just like that. So let's continue reading. Considering the widespread dispersion of the balloons reported from the Arctic Circle to the Mexican border, the primary goal was to prevent the Japanese from learning of their effectiveness. On the 4th of January 1945, the Office of Censorship requested newspaper editors and radio broadcasters to give no publicity whatsoever to balloon incidents. Did you just hear that? Gee, and I've always wondered why doesn't UFO seekers, like, no one ever talks about it in the news media? Gee, is there like some coordinated campaign that's like directed by Hollywood and like people aren't allowed to talk about things? I always thought these things were like a conspiracy until you read stuff like this. And so let's read that again. On the 4th of January, 1945, the Office of Censorship requested newspaper editors and radio broadcasters to give no publicity whatsoever to balloon incidents. This voluntary censorship was adhered to from coast to coast, a remarkable self-restraint in a free press-conscious country. 3 months later, in a strictly confidential note to editors and broadcasters, the Office of Censorship stated, "Cooperation from the press and radio under this request has been excellent, despite the fact that the Japanese free balloons are reaching the United States, Canada, and Mexico in increasing numbers. There is no question that your refusal to publish or broadcast information about these balloons has baffled the Japanese, annoyed and hindered them, and has been an important contribution to security." The success of the security measures was indicated by an Associated Press release, October 2nd, 1945, following the surrender that contained these comments. Quote, "The Japanese listened eagerly to radio reports, hoping to hear of the bombs' effectiveness. But American editors voluntarily kept the information to themselves and so discouraged the Japanese that they abandoned the project. The Japanese learned of only one bomb landing in the United States. It was one which came down in Wyoming and failed to explode." The voluntary censorship, ironically, made it difficult to warn the people of the bomb danger. The risk seemed justified as weeks went by and no casualties were reported. On May 5th, 1945, however, 5 children and a woman were killed near Lakeview, Oregon, by a balloon bomb which exploded as they dragged it from the woods. This tragic accident caused the government to abandon its campaign of silence. On the 22nd of May, a joint statement by the War and Navy Departments was issued which described the nature of the balloon bombs and warned all persons not to tamper with any such objects that they might find. The balloon weapon was said to constitute no serious military threat to the United States because the attacks were so scattered and aimless. The statement continued by saying that the possible saving of even one American life through precautionary measures would more than offset any military gain occurring to the enemy from more knowledge that some of the balloons had actually arrived on the side of the Pacific. An educational campaign was instituted at once to warn all persons, particularly children, of the danger of tampering with strange objects found in the woods. Found in the woods. Okay, so that's a lot to digest. We've pretty much been here on an hour. Yeah, yeah. Crazy. I was reading some of the comments on there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, at least there's some people on there. Yeah, we're like insanely censored on this platform. So I expect about what is there, 80 viewers? Yeah, see, and yet the spy balloon is like a national incident, and I'm looking at it right now, and we have 80 concurrent viewers, up down to 78. So we need to think about that too, okay? Because before I really used to be on, wow, these view counts. It really like matters, like how many views I get, bro. Like that's how popular you are. But the main concern is literally like reaching one person with effective information and the truth. So I just want you to know that the 77 people, because right, I said tens when this started, right? I said like 10 people are going to see this video. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's like 77. So I just want you to know that you 77 people who are watching this literally know more than the entire news media knows about balloon incidents. You've learned about the Office of Censorship. You've learned about newspapers doing voluntary censorship with the government of not telling people things. You've learned about real balloon attacks that were happening on U.S. soil. We learned about the family that died in Oregon. And these things haven't even been told. I haven't even seen them. And so I'd like to say thank you to the viewers who tuned in. It's up to 79, 64 likes. Thank you so much, friends, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. There's going to be more on this guy coming up because this guy is really important. I wish I could say his name, but I can't. So there'll be more on this guy coming up soon. And then also we saw the picture of the gentleman in London who made the air raid mine because balloons had been utilized for a long time. And so this is an authentic picture too. It's real, 1939. And so thank you, friends, the 77 of you. You and I have now educated ourselves beyond probably the majority of the United States. And if you are outside of the United States, I think no different of you. So we're all just one people trying to find answers to the alien question. And unfortunately, a lot of times it kind of wraps back to national security, and we end up talking about things like this. So I hope you all have a great day, and look for the end of our Art Bell video where we're sky watching in Pahrump, Nevada to be coming up soon. And I hope you all have a great day.